Before I talk about my work as a photographer, I want to give you a little bit of background. And I began my career as a graphic designer. Here's a piece of work from 20 years ago. This is a piece of work designed by myself for a friend of mine, Doug Menuez. Doug is a very well-known American photographer, lives in New York now. And in actual fact, it was Doug that really inspired me to pick up a camera and become a photographer myself. And it was through pieces of work like this that I found my love of print, because when I was a designer, it was all designed for print. And so I spent decades on the back of printing presses and really loved it. And that passion has stayed with me right through my career until the present day. For today's workshop, I'd like to share my passion for print and my passion for landscape. And in fact, some of the biggest commissions of my career as a photographer have been for landscape. What I look for most in a landscape is atmosphere. That will come from, of course, location, but also time of day and weather conditions. Here, for example, the mist and the calm on one day, and then just a few days later, storm force winds and gales. Lens choice can also bring something new and different to a landscape. This is a 400mm prime lens, and I just love the shapes and the feel within this picture. For me, getting out and shooting landscapes from home is very much a relaxing process. I'm looking for the right conditions. A bright sunny day isn't necessarily the kind of day I would shoot in. Ideally, I would prefer atmosphere, blocks of cloud, maybe with shafts of sunlight. There's something about being around water, of course. In fact, landscape photography in many ways is about relaxation. It's about being mindful. I don't hang around too long in any one particular landscape, and I kind of like to pick off my pictures, and I look forward to getting home and seeing what I've shot. But nevertheless, I do feel connected to the environment when I'm shooting. Also here, one of my favorite types of light, when you get shafts of light just appearing on a hillside and the rest of the landscape might go into shadow. The cameras that I use now are very, very high resolution. The detail is extraordinary. You look down in the bottom left there, you can see the sheep and the sheep trails. And when you zoom into the file, all that data is there. And of course, what's great about that is that modern printers and paper can reproduce that. So let's have a look at that process, and let's take a journey into print. And for that, I've chosen this picture. This is a picture I shot just after Christmas. In fact, it was New Year, the 2nd of January. I'm drawing heavily on my background as a graphic designer here. It had started to snow. The sun was setting, so there's warmth in the background. But rather than take maybe a conventional picture of snow, I quite like the idea of using the long lens. This is a 500 millimeter at 500 millimeters, and just capturing the snow. But in this case, it's in the bokeh. It's both in and out of focus. Before I go ahead and make a print, there's a few simple steps that I need to take. Probably the most important of which is to calibrate my monitor. And to do that, I'm going to need one of these, spectrophotometer. Now, you don't need to get anything quite as expensive as this. You can pick these up for maybe 150 to 200 pounds. But this is going to give us a standard. It's going to standardize our colors and our brightness. For example, if your monitor was too bright, your print would be too dark. And if there's one thing that you're going to need above all other to help with a color managed workflow, it's a calibrated screen. It's worth remembering that this calibrates just about any screen, even a smartphone. And it's also going to take into account the ambient light. And we should remember that monitor color and brightness shift, so regular calibration is important. If you're thinking about buying a new monitor, then you can even get one of these built in, as I have here with my ISO Color Edge. So let's move on to the next stage now in the process, the ICC profile. So why do we need an ICC profile? Well, an ICC profile allows us to translate the colors between devices. So for example, it enables us to match what we see here on screen, which is projected light, with what we see here on paper from our printer, which is reflected light. Downloading and installing an ICC profile couldn't be simpler. Just go to the Hahnemühle website and you'll see here some simple prompts: printer manufacturer, printer and paper type. Once you've downloaded the profile, follow the instructions on the README file. The rest is simple. As creatives, we're always looking for ways in which we can somehow capture the way we look, see, and feel about the world, to take our own individuality and stamp it into the work we produce. And for me, I do that in a few ways. From the capture, it's with the use of fast primes. And in print, it's paper choice. Between taking a photograph and making a print, there's one other vital step, and that is post-production. One of the hardest skills to master, for me at least as a photographer, was learning how to edit. These selects were made from some 3,000 capture files. My post-production process is relatively straightforward. Here, I'll use Adobe's profiles and make very few adjustments, possibly exposure, maybe a little contrast. One of my favorites, dehaze, as you can see here. That's really helping with those shafts of sunlight. A little bit of sharpening, nowhere near what I would have used maybe 10 years ago, because modern printers are so much more capable. And as you can see in this file, there's a huge amount of data. My workflow is raw. This was shot on a Canon EOS R5 with an RF 85mm 1.2 prime. So the file is as good as it gets. So let's have a look why we calibrate our screen and why we install ICC profiles. Well, here in Lightroom Classic, I'm going to check this box, softproof, and up here, the top right, you'll see the profiles. You can run down them: bamboo, hemp, pearl, agave. Let's go for bamboo. And now, if I check this box, let's see what happens to the picture. It's going to simulate the paper and ink, and it's really very good. So this is a soft-proof screen emulation of what my finished print is going to look like. Post-production complete. I'm now ready to send a file to print. I'm going to choose this one, my favorite, the trees in the snow. I'm going to export that into Canon Professional Print and Layout. This is a plugin. I'm going to choose my printer, Pro300. The media type I found when I downloaded the README file for the Hahnemühle profile. For bamboo natural line, it says heavyweight fine art. Paper size, A3. Print quality, of course, highest. Contrast reproduction is going to help with the sharpening of the file. And just a couple more things. ICC profile, well, of course, I downloaded that earlier. I'm going to print on bamboo, so that's selected. For me, at least, the rendering intent is usually always perceptual. Black point compensation, well, I want to crush the blacks in this. I don't want to increase any detail in those, so I'm going to leave that unchecked. I've got one more opportunity to soft-proof. Now, happy with the file, I can send it to print. Before I go any further, I'd like to talk about the importance of paper choice and how that's going to impact upon my final print. The journey from capture to print is just the very end of a much longer journey. And that journey, for me, started decades ago when I decided to be a creative, when I decided to be a graphic designer, and then a photographer and a filmmaker. And so there's decades of knowledge, of learning and experience, all that intellectual property. And so when I take my picture, all those decades go from here and they finish at the final destination, which is ink on paper. And that's why paper choice is so important. I've been using Hahnemühle paper now for 20 years. And for the last 10, my go-to paper has been this, FineArt Inkjet, Glossy Fine Art, Pearl. This is a really versatile paper. It's neither too matte or too gloss. I love the way it holds the ink. And as with all the FineArt Inkjet paper range, it's archival. And that's really, really important. We'll come to that a little bit later. But of course, the paper that you choose is driven by the story that you want to tell and the kind of picture that you've taken. So whilst fine art glossy might work for one picture, another might require matte. My print workflow begins with Canon and ends with Canon. In fact, Canon are one of the few brands that make both cameras and printers. Today I'm going to be using this. It's the entry-level image prograph. It's the Image Prograph Pro300. It shares all the huge capability of other bigger printers in the range. It's 10 color. It's got a wide color gamut, particularly good at black and white. It can print A3 plus full bleed. It takes up very small amount of space on your desk. So it's a good starting point for anybody who wants to get into printing, and particularly into fine art archival printing. Hahnemühle FineArt inkjet papers are tried, tested and trusted by photographers all over the world, whether it be matte, gloss, or now the new natural line. As you can see, the industry has already recognized this product, awarding it the 2020 Best Inkjet Photo Papers. There are 3 in the range: bamboo, hemp, and agave. And this continues Hahnemühle's tradition in environmental responsibility and the perfect choice for my Peak District landscapes. So before I go ahead and open the box and touch the paper, I'm going to put on my gloves. And the reason for this is that I don't want to get any oil from my skin or dirt on the paper surface itself, as that could affect its archival properties in years to come. As with all Hahnemühle papers, get the paperwork here, and there's an interesting note about certificate of authenticity, and I'll come to that later. So we can see the texture here. Bamboo is 90% bamboo fiber, 10% cotton. It's a warm tone, natural white. All the papers in the range are matte coated and 290 GSM. So let's pop that in the printer. A3, heavy art paper, register. Everything's set. Now ready to make a print. So whilst we're waiting for the print, let's take a look at FineArt Pearl. As the name suggests, it's neither matte nor gloss. In fact, for me, it feels more analog than digital, and I think that's probably why so many photographers love this paper. Just look at the incredible detail. Every brick. Rich, deep blacks. This wonderful texture. I love the shade of white. Of course, the subtleties and the tone. Seeing ink on paper like this makes me realize why I love print and makes all that hard effort worthwhile. So let's take a look at our first print. This is natural lined bamboo. And the first impression is that this print on this paper represents everything I've come to love about Hahnemühle FineArt inkjet paper. The deep blacks, the detail, the warm tone of the paper. There's a small amount of texture. It feels substantial, 290 GSM. Let's have a look at the detail, and for that, I'm going to use a loupe, and I'm going to be careful not to touch the surface of the paper. Amazing. I can see even the light shining through the stones and the fence posts on the horizon line here of the stone wall. All that hard work, all that effort, screen calibration, printer profile, it all goes into making this final result, this print. And in this case, I have to say it was right first time. And that's what you want. You don't want to be wasting paper, especially paper as good as this. Let's have a look at agave and hemp. This is agave. It's 70% agave fibers and 30% cotton. It's got this lovely texture, which is particularly interesting in this file because if you look within the highlight of the cloud, it adds shape. It's a good example of finding the right paper for the right picture. All the details there, all the tone. Look at this area within the print here. There's a highlight on the far hillside. It's really, really subtle, and yet it's all captured there, ink on paper. I like the natural bright white. It feels substantial at 290 GSM. Let's have a look at hemp. This is a smoother surface. Hemp is 60% hemp fiber and 40% cotton. This is probably what most photographers have come to expect from a fine art inkjet matte paper. It's beautifully captured the subtlety here within the file. All the details there. Again, natural bright white, 290 GSM. Again on hemp. This epitomizes everything I love about print. All that hard work, all that effort from the capture, the screen calibration, the ICC profiles, through to ink on paper. It's almost as if I'm looking through a window to the very moment that I took the picture. All of the detail, all of the tone, and most of all of the atmosphere. The birds flying from tree to tree. Seeing a file like this on this hemp matte paper makes me rethink how I might print in the future. And for landscapes like this one, it'll be on matte paper. If you're buying or selling a print, it's important to know that that print is archival. But what does that mean? Well, this print was made using Canon Lucia Pro inks, which are archival. The paper is Hahnemühle FineArt inkjet, which is also archival. If I was to frame this print, it could last anywhere between 50 and 60 years. However, if I was to box it in the right way, it could last between 100 and 300 years. My print has reached the end of one journey and is about to embark upon another, and that's to the customer. And for that, it's going to need one of these. This is a certificate of authenticity. You can buy these kits from Hahnemühle. It's deckled edge mold paper. It's watermarked, UV security fibers, and a unique numbered hologram system. One on the certificate and one on the print. In a world where over 1 trillion pictures are taken every year, I believe that print brings craft back to the medium of photography. No two monitors are ever the same, but when I make a print, I know it will be consistent with how I want others to see my work. Print's tactile. It's beautiful. It's emotive. It evokes feeling. It's archival. And it's valuable. So thanks for joining us for the Q&A. Hope you enjoyed the pre-record there. And so first of all, I think you know who I am from the session you've just seen. Clive Booth, Canon ambassador, photographer, filmmaker, and as you saw, graphic designer. And I'm joined by two colleagues, Stefan and Sven. Would you like to introduce yourselves? Shall we start with you, Stefan?
Yes, thank you so much, Clive. It's an honor to be here. My name is Stefan Neumann. I'm just the technical support manager of Hahnemühle FineArt. You can see it. Yeah, that's me. So whenever there's coming up a question regarding paper making, longevity, or printing, that's always me to ask. And I'm here with my colleague Sven. I'd like to hand over to him. He is even working at the technical support department of Hahnemühle.
Yeah, hello from my side. My name is Sven, and I'm working in technical support department for more than 25 years now. And I saw there are some questions, and I'm afraid to answer them very well now.
Thanks, Sven. Thanks, Stefan. I'll kick things off with a question that I'm seeing here from William. William has got a question about which printer. Now, before we go any further, I should say that we've got a fourth colleague, and that's Suhaib Hussain from Canon EMEA, who's a product specialist, marketing specialist. And if you've got any specific questions about Canon printers, in this case, as you've seen, the Imageprograph Pro300, Suhaib will be able to answer those questions. But to come back to William's question, which is the A3 printer you mentioned is the best? Again, Suhaib could probably throw some light on that. For me, it's the Imageprograph Pro300, which you saw in the film. And again, Suhaib will explain. Wide color gamut, A3 plus, and it's 10 color. It's a kind of an entry level archival printer. Would you like to add anything to that particular product, Stefan? Because, by the way, just before I go to Stefan, can I just explain a little bit that, Stefan, I know you'll add to this, but it's a fascinating subject. You get involved in producing profiles and you know about printers way before any of the rest of us, including me as a Canon ambassador. Is that correct?
More or less, yes, because I'm coming from a research and development background. I was working at the University of Wuppertal. That's far away. It's 30 years ago. We start with the ICC profiling and the idea behind color management 35 years ago. So yes, I was involved. I was one of the people doing the first lockup tables, for example.
Excellent.
Give me a feeling of being very old. Sorry, but
well, you're not alone there. You're not alone there. But I think the point I'm kind of trying to make here, though, is that when Canon have an idea for a product, Hahnemühle are there right with them from the outset, and that includes, as Stefan, Sven, and I know, big thick pages of non-disclosure agreements. So Emily's got a good question. What weight is your paper? So FineArt inkjet paper, the paper that we're working with for natural line is 290 GSM. Again, do you guys want to add anything to paper weight and what that means to a paper?
Yeah, normally paper weight grammage is one point, the thickness is another point. We are talking about papers with volume up from 1.75 to 3. So this means papers should be thick, around about 1.8 millimeters. So,
and
weight is one point.
And also, we've got now. You're going to have to forgive me here. Now, you and I talk on. This is. I think it's Gitano or Giatano. We talk on social media all the time, but I've never had to pronounce your name. So forgive me if I don't get it right. But thanks for joining. And the question is, would you consider different papers for different printers, or you go for a specific feel and a type of paper? Well, for me, as you probably saw earlier from the film, I love fine art inkjet paper, and my particular favorite is Pearl. And I know that Stefan and I talked about this the other day, and I know it's not just my favorite because it's got a very particular texture. Would you agree, Stefan?
Yeah, I'd like to add something. One of the papers I like the most is the Barita papers because they give a little bit of vintage, the look from old darkroom papers. That's what I like most. That's Photo Rag Barita, for example. But as always, it's a personal taste. Let's say it that way.
Yeah, I mean, I'm at the rostrum now, and I mean, this was the paper that I've worked with, as you saw from the film, for over 10 years. But now I'm starting to work with the, you know, the natural line, and I'm really enjoying that, actually. Really enjoying that. But I'm still keen to experiment with different papers. But going back to the question, I don't choose a paper to meet a printer. The paper's chosen because it performs in the best possible way, no matter what the printer. In my case, I have an ImagePrograph Pro 300, as you know. I have an ImagePrograph Pro 1000. I have an ImagePrograph Pro 2000, and I run the same paper on all of the machines. So some might be 24-inch roll, might be A2, and then other might be A3. But just whilst we're on the subject of paper, something that I found interesting that we talked about the other day was gamut, density, and resolution. Could you explain a little bit more about that? Those three subjects?
Yeah, sure. Whenever you are printing the picture, you need a wide color gamut to show everything you captured with your camera. So therefore, the color gamut is one of the crucial points. And we try to take care to get a wide gamut by having the right coating and developing the coating as good as possible. So density is the second point. You need deep blacks, deep colors always. And resolution, all the three parameters are combined with our special coating. And I think it's one of the best on the market. So I think coating is the main point.
And also, I know that we talked about gamut, didn't we, the other day, about the achievable color gamut with Hahnemühle paper, which is extremely good. That's correct, isn't it?
Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, I think so. It is. It depends on the special way how we put the pigments into the first layer. So that's a secret. It's a production secret, to be honest. But it's that's the way we are talking about, and that's the main point to develop the best coating for this parameter of printing. It's only one parameter, but one of the main parameters, I guess.
And we just to go to Paul's got an interesting question here. This is a printer question, so again, Suhaib, if you want to dive in on the chat from Canon about this. Paul wants to know: do you print your black and white images in color mode rather than using the black and white only settings on the printer? Now, obviously, Paul knows the product really well because the ImagePrograph Pro 300 has a black and white mode, which you can. And again, there's another question, and I can sort of touch on the answer for that question as well. I go through Canon Professional Print and Layout. It's, for me, as you've seen from the film, my input is Canon, my output is Canon, and Canon Professional Print and Layout is like the glue that cements all that together. But in between that, I go through Adobe Lightroom, occasionally Photoshop, but predominantly Adobe Lightroom. Now, the interesting point here, where we can bring Stefan and Sven in, is that although the Pro300 has got a black and white mode, which is extremely good, by the way, because Hahnemühle works so closely with Canon from the very early stages of printer development, Hahnemühle are able to work on very, very good ICC profiles. And of course, if you've got a really good ICC profile and you're producing a black and white print, in theory at least, you don't need to sort of cut off that you know, the profile and go to the black and white print mode. Anything to add on that, Stefan, Sven?
Yeah, there's one main point you have to keep in mind. Whenever we are doing profiling at Hahnemühle, the only thing we can do is so-called average profiling, because as you know, the profile is a combination out of the media, the ink, and your printer, not my printer. So what we are doing is an average profiling. That means we have almost 2 or 3 printers of the same model, and we are taking at least 10 different shots from different makings to get the average profile. But even the best profile shouldn't fit 100% to your printer at home. So therefore, the balance between the colors should be not as good as it could be. So therefore, the black and white mode is doable. It's a good one, as you mentioned before. But normally, if you have a good ICC profile, there's no need to use it.
And of course, we can write our own. You know, I sometimes write my own profiles if you got. We're very short on time. We've got two minutes left. So Martin's got a really interesting question about. Martin uses luster paper for landscape and street, and is this similar to the Hahnemühle Pearl? It's. I mean, I haven't used the luster paper. What would you guys say to that?
I like to hand over to Sven this way.
Yeah, we do have in the Hahnemühle photo range both options. So we do have a Hahnemühle luster paper and also a Hahnemühle photo pearl paper. And it depends a little bit on the image you want to choose, because the pearl paper has a slightly more pearl surface. So my favorite is pearl at that point, because it's a little bit more special than the luster paper.
Me too. We've got about 1 minute and 30 seconds left. We've got a question here about monitor brightness. I use an ISO Color Edge, which has got a built-in spectrophotometer. You can buy spectrophotometers, I think between anything from 100 to 200 pounds, and that will calibrate your monitor for you. It will set the brightness point. 1 minute left. Sven, any thoughts about calibration and color management workflow? I know it's hard to put that into a minute. I struggle to put it into 25, but certainly on monitor calibration. In fact, projected light, reflected light.
Stefan, take that.
Yeah, very easy. The main thing I need to say is do it. Do your calibration. Because soft proofing helps so much in all picture work and protect you from spending too much paper and ink. So do the calibration, and as you mentioned, the ISO is a perfect one. We are using the same.
Yeah. I mean that's
so
just perfect.
Sometimes a short story. Sometimes we are doing a print, cutting in the middle, glue it on the monitor, and show it our customers.
Exactly.
To show how exactly it is. Yeah.
So I just want to say thanks for joining us. Thanks for the great questions, and happy printing.
Yeah. Thank you.